What happens when a name becomes a battlefield, when the intertwined threads of legacy, love, and profound loss unravel in the harsh glare of the public eye, and the raw truth lies buried beneath years of silence? For too long, Dale Earnhardt Jr. remained quiet, holding back the pain, the sting of rejection, and the bitter conflicts that simmered behind the scenes of NASCAR's most legendary dynasty. But now, Dale Jr. is finally breaking his silence about his father and stepmother, and the story is far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone imagined. The silence is shattered. In this revealing account, we delve into the untold chapters of Dale Jr.'s relentless fight for his own identity, the deep emotional scars etched by his father's profound distance, and the chilling power struggle that unfolded with his stepmother, Teresa. Dale Earnhardt Jr. wasn't merely born into the world of racing, he was catapulted into a legacy that burned with an intensity hotter than any engine on the track. From his birth in 1974, the Earnhardt name carried a weight, a significance far beyond the ordinary. His father, Dale Earnhardt Sr., was no mere driver, he was the Intimidator, a colossal figure in NASCAR history whose very presence commanded both reverence and fear. The racetrack wasn't just a venue for competition, it was a hallowed battleground where legends were forged. And young Dale Jr. entered the world with the thunderous roar of engines already echoing in his ears, but being the son of such a titan meant a life far more intricate than simply growing up surrounded by speed and fame. It meant existing beneath an immense, ever-present shadow, where every move was scrutinized, every misstep magnified. The world demanded greatness, but the internal reality was often a harsh, solitary experience. Life moved at a breakneck pace, often too fast for a child. No contest, Dale Earnhardt Jr. through .3 laps to go. Here comes J. The relentless noise of the engines often masked the profound silence left by absences. His childhood was meticulously shaped by speed and an unyielding discipline, yet it rarely offered the warmth or carefree freedom most children take for granted. The demands of racing were relentless, and the family's personal needs were frequently pushed aside. In this crucible, Dale Jr. learned early that survival meant mastering the track, even if that mastery came at the cost of a simpler, more innocent childhood. As a boy, Dale Jr.'s life was punctuated by a fracture that few outsiders could truly comprehend: his parents' divorce. Brenda Jackson, his mother, fought fiercely to provide him with a semblance of stability amidst the swirling chaos of fame and speed. She was a grounding presence, desperately trying to hold together the fragments of normalcy that the racing life so often shattered. Yet, the powerful gravity of his father's world inexorably pulled Dale Jr. back into a sphere where family ties were intricately tangled with complex business deals and overwhelming public expectations. Dale Sr. remarried Teresa Houston, and with her arrival, the Earnhardt household transformed. It became less a home brimming with shared moments and more a meticulously managed operation, singularly focused on racing success. The warmth and casual intimacy often associated with family life were conspicuously absent here. Instead, emotions were guarded, conversations were measured, and love itself was often translated into achievement and performance. His sister, Kelly Earnhardt, who stood by Dale Jr. as a steadfast confidant and protector, has described their family dynamic as one where feelings were rarely, if ever, articulated aloud. Instead, survival meant learning to decipher unspoken cues, understanding that in this family, love was demonstrated through sheer grit, unwavering resilience, and the capacity to perform under immense pressure. For Dale Jr., growing up meant mastering the art of driving, not just on the racetrack, but through the intricate and often unforgiving terrain of a family that, while united by blood, frequently felt profoundly distant in spirit. Became my friend or talked to me or showed me any interest. I couldn't help but, it was a world where every victory, no matter how small, felt like a hard-won triumph over the pervasive silence that perpetually hovered in the background, a silence shaped by the towering legacy of a father who was at once a hero and an enigma. Dale Earnhardt Sr. wasn't just a legend on the racetrack. He was a near-mythic figure whose very presence commanded an almost religious reverence. To the outside world, he was the Intimidator. Fierce, unyielding, and seemingly untouchable, but beneath that steely exterior lay a man whose emotional vocabulary was profoundly limited, especially when it came to his own family. At home, Dale Sr. was not the same charismatic force he was on the asphalt. Instead, he was distant, intensely focused, and seemingly armored against any form of vulnerability. In Dale Jr.'s eyes, his father was a towering figure, a god among mortals who had carved out a kingdom at 200 mph, yet that all was always accompanied by an undercurrent of uncertainty and a deep, unspoken longing. His father's affection felt conditional, something to be earned through speed, skill, and victory. There were no soft embraces or warm affirmations waiting at the finish line, only a measured nod, or more often, a profound silence. The words, "I'm proud of you," were rare treasures, spoken as sparingly as trophies were won. Dale Jr. wrestled privately with a question that has haunted many children of greatness: did his father truly see him as a competitor in his own right, or merely as a shadow destined to fill a predetermined role? Racing was the language Dale Sr. spoke fluently, and it was often the only dialect through which he communicated anything resembling love. Every curve taken, every risk accepted, every hard-fought lap was a conversation. To win was to earn approval, to fall short was to confront the cold reality that love and recognition were never guaranteed. This relentless demand forged a complex bond, one that fueled Dale Jr.'s passion but also left subtle cracks in his emotional foundation. That he idolized his father with a reverence that bordered on the religious, yet he grew up navigating an emotional wilderness where vulnerability was perceived as a weakness, and praise was a prize to be fiercely battled for. Earnhardt Jr., Mark Gordon, Stewart, Dale Jarrett back in 14th. The track was their shared kingdom and their ultimate battleground, the one place where Dale Jr. felt closest to his father, but it was also the crucible where love was constantly tested, meticulously measured, and carefully rationed. Off the track, Dale Sr. remained a man defined by discipline and an almost impenetrable distance, a man who could conquer any racecourse, but struggled profoundly to bridge the most intimate distances of all, when Dale Jr. stepped under Teresa Earnhardt's roof. The established rules of family and loyalty shifted into a new, unfamiliar gear. While Dale Earnhardt Sr. had his hands on the steering wheel, Teresa was not the archetypal stepmother of folklore. She did not rule with cruelty or a coldness born of disdain, but neither was she a source of warmth or maternal softness. Instead, she approached the Earnhardt family legacy with the precise, strategic mindset of a seasoned CEO managing a high-stakes enterprise. Her stewardship of DEI, the Earnhardt racing empire, was marked by a sharp business acumen and an unwavering focus on legacy preservation. Emotions, it seemed, were always secondary to control and order. In Teresa's domain, everything had to meticulously reflect the grandeur and seriousness of the Earnhardt name. For Dale Jr., this translated into a relationship that was pragmatic, almost transactional. Even their interactions were characterized more by negotiation than by nurture, more by professional boundaries than by familial closeness. Dale Jr. never once called her Mom. The title felt foreign, a role Teresa neither invited nor assumed. There were no bedtime stories, no whispered reassurances in the dark, no simple gestures of comfort that a child might long for. Instead, there were expectations, high ones, unyielding ones, that demanded he live up to the rigorous standards set not only by his father but now rigorously enforced under Teresa's watchful eye. In that household, the Earnhardt legacy was like polished chrome, gleaming brilliantly in the spotlight, dazzling and seemingly untouchable, but beneath that lustrous surface, it was cold and unyielding. The warmth of family life was often sacrificed at the altar of ambition and reputation. Love was measured by performance and strict adherence to an image meticulously curated for the public gaze. For Dale Jr., the home was a proving ground, not a refuge. His emotional needs were frequently sidelined in favor of legacy maintenance. Yet, even in this demanding environment, a young man forged resilience and an unshakable determination. The pressure cooker of Teresa's rule may have stifled tenderness, but it also tempered his resolve. In the shadows of a complex family dynamic, Dale Jr. would learn to carve his own path, one lap at a time, racing not just against competitors, but against the immense expectations and the lingering ghosts of those who came before him. For years, Dale Jr. had lived under the immense shadow of a man who was larger than life, a father who commanded respect not through words, but through sheer presence and the thunderous roar of engines. Growing up, Dale Sr.'s attention was often singularly reserved for the track, the race, the next big win. The boy, despite sharing blood and name, often felt invisible beneath the crushing weight of expectations. But everything shifted irrevocably the day Dale Jr. claimed his first victory. Been around people that did and people that didn't. And he was just 17, a teenager still learning the unforgiving language of racing, when the checkered flag waved over him, the world seemed to momentarily pause. More importantly, his father's gaze did too. Dale Sr. looked at his son not with the distant glance of a parent managing an heir, but with the sharp, measured respect of a seasoned competitor, recognizing a worthy rival, or perhaps, a true successor. It was like he finally saw me, but not as his boy, not as just family. He saw me as a driver, Dale Jr. would later recall, the memory laced with both pride and a bittersweet yearning. That look held a complex mix of approval and challenge, almost as if to say, you belong here, but the bar is still set incredibly high. Yet, this validation was a fragile thing. It wasn't wrapped in warm embraces or encouraging words. It was a currency traded in wins and losses, in laps led and races finished. The rare acknowledgement, though electrifying, only deepened the quiet gulf between father and son. When the engines cooled, Dale Jr. craved more than mere performance-based recognition. He longed for the kind of unconditional approval that could never truly be earned in the heat of competition. Off the track, the silence remained, thick, heavy, and persistently present. The roar of the crowd faded, but the echoing sound of unmet emotional needs lingered. That fleeting moment of recognition was both a breakthrough and a stark reminder. In the Earnhardt world, love was measured in victory, and anything less felt like falling short. February 18, 2001, dawned like any other day in the racing world, full of anticipation, adrenaline, and the familiar chaos of engines revving and tires screeching. The Daytona 500 was more than just a race. It was a grand stage where legends were made and forever remembered, but no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what that fateful day would ultimately bring. When Dale Sr. crashed on the final lap, the collective breath of millions of fans was held, and then shattered. The unthinkable had happened. The man who had defined a generation of racing was gone, right there on the track that had been his kingdom. For Dale Jr., it was more than a headline, it was a gut-wrenching rupture, a seismic shift in the very foundation of his world. That final race made it heartbreakingly clear. Dale Sr. wasn't just competing, he was protecting. On that last lap, he deliberately stayed back, blocking the charging field so that Michael Waltrip and Dale Jr., both driving for Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, DEI, could break free. It was a selfless move from a father who, in his own way, was showing love the only way he knew how, by clearing the path for his son. But grief in the Earnhardt family was a quiet, private thing. It wasn't something to be splashed across headlines or broadcast on live television. It was contained, often hidden behind the stoic masks forged through years of hardship and toughness. When Dale Earnhardt had his hands on the steering wheel, he felt and saw things that you and I will never see. Teresa Earnhardt stepped firmly into the role of protector and manager, steering the estate and the empire with an iron will. The public saw the strength. Behind closed doors, the family wrestled with a profound, almost unbearable loss. Dale Jr. responded by burying his pain under layers of relentless work and unyielding expectation. He threw himself into racing with a fierce determination, perhaps to outrun the deafening silence that followed his father's death, or to prove that he could carry the Earnhardt name alone. But beneath every victory and every press conference was a wound that stubbornly refused to heal, an absence that echoed louder than any engine. The noise had stopped, but the silence was truly deafening. It wasn't just the end of a life, it was the end of a pivotal chapter in Dale Jr.'s identity, leaving him to navigate a path where legacy and loss intertwined in a complicated, unspoken way. As time stretched on, the subtle cracks between Dale Jr. and DEI widened until they were no longer subtle fissures, but unmistakable, gaping divides. What had begun as a shared legacy, built on the formidable foundation of his father's legendary career, slowly transformed into a bitter battlefield of control, inheritance, and ultimately, identity. Dale Jr. wasn't just seeking a symbolic role or a ceremonial seat, he desperately wanted equity, ownership, a real, tangible say in the empire that bore his bloodline and his very name. But Teresa Earnhardt, widow of Dale Sr. and CEO of DEI, managed the business with a cold, unyielding resolve. She clung tightly to every decision, every asset, every inch of the Earnhardt brand, and for all his contributions and sacrifices, Dale Jr. found himself locked out of the very machine his father had so painstakingly built. And as an analyst, right, I want to be reminded by all of the things that a driver goes through, thinks about. The contradiction became unbearable. The Earnhardt name was emblazoned on the building, the race cars, the merchandise, but the son who carried that name was no longer welcome behind the wheel or at the boardroom table. Teresa steadfastly refused to give Dale Jr. and his sister Kelly a major share in the company their father had built, despite the fact that Dale Sr. had envisioned DEI as something to be passed down to his children. In 2006, she hired Max Siegel as the president of global operations for DEI, and later Chip Ganassi Racing acquired them and rebranded themselves as Earnhardt Ganassi Racing, but their relationship reached its absolute tipping point well before this acquisition. The tension had already begun surfacing as early as December 2003. In a revealing episode of The Dale Jr. Download, Dale Jr. vividly recalled a moment when things truly began to unravel. He hadn't been paid in 3 months. When he confronted team executive Ty Norris, he was told to take it up with Teresa, and to keep things professional. But the conversation quickly exploded. Dale Jr. shouted, "Y'all haven't paid me. You've breached my contract." Norris recalled, "It became bitter, you said what you wanted to say and didn't want to stick around longer." Dale Jr. would finally leave DEI in 2008, but things only worsened for the team afterward. The tension came to a head in a moment that many fans still remember with disbelief: Teresa's outright refusal to allow Dale Jr. to take the cherished number 8 car with him when he left DEI. On the surface, it was just a number, but in racing, numbers are sacred, they embody identity. That 8 wasn't random, it had been Dale Jr.'s identity, inextricably tied to his rise, his father's memory, and his personal brand. When Teresa withheld it, she sent a message more brutal than any words: "This legacy belongs to me, not to you." But the betrayal, incredibly, didn't end there. Years later, in 2016, long after Dale Jr. had carved out his own successful path with JR Motorsports, a quiet but shocking legal battle erupted. Dale Jr. filed a trademark application for the right to use his own last name in various business ventures under his personal brand that he simply wanted to legally protect, Earnhardt, as part of future media and merchandising projects. Teresa objected, not symbolically, not passively. She filed a formal legal opposition to Dale Jr.'s trademark request. Incredibly, the son of Dale Earnhardt, the man who carried that name from birth, who had helped elevate it to modern legend, was now being challenged in federal trademark court by his own stepmother. Teresa claimed that granting Dale Jr. the rights could create confusion in the marketplace, potentially infringing on her control of DEI trademarks. It was more than a legal dispute, it was deeply personal, and it was devastating. Dale Jr. was essentially told, "You don't own your name, not here, not anymore." The court filing became public, fans were stunned. The same woman who had frozen him out of DEI was now trying to prevent him from using the one thing no legal filing should ever touch, his identity. As the legal filings between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Teresa Earnhardt became public, a new, painful chapter in their long, tense relationship unfolded, not behind the closed doors of DEI, not in a quiet boardroom or a private family meeting, but out in the open, where the entire world could see it. It was no longer just about control over a car number. Now, the conflict reached the very core of identity, the Earnhardt name itself. To NASCAR fans, this wasn't just legal news, it was deeply personal. The family they had grown up watching, rooting for, and emotionally investing in was now openly at war over who could rightfully claim the name of their fallen hero. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Online message boards lit up with disbelief, Twitter and Facebook exploded with hashtags and hot takes. For many, the idea that Teresa Earnhardt would oppose Dale Jr.'s right to trademark the name Earnhardt was the ultimate betrayal, not because it was shocking she'd fight for brand control, she had always been business-minded, but because it proved what so many had quietly feared, that she had never truly seen Dale Jr. as a part of the family. This wasn't just legal maneuvering, it was a razor sharp cut, and through all of it, Teresa said nothing, not a single attempt to explain why she had taken this stance or what motivated her to keep denying Dale Jr. even the most basic, symbolic claim to his own family legacy. For years, she had been a quiet presence, aloof in public, selective with media, and intensely private. That stoicism may have once passed for dignity, but at this moment, it read differently. It read as cold. As the legal storm churned, Dale Jr. did something few expected. He remained remarkably calm. He did not launch a public campaign. He did not call out Teresa by name. He did not demand sympathy. Instead, he continued speaking the only way he knew how, with quiet, honest clarity, through his podcast, the Dale Jr. Download, in interviews, and eventually in the Earnhardt docuseries. He let the truth emerge piece by piece, not as an act of revenge, but as a profound release. That he spoke about the pain of being sidelined at DEI, about what it felt like to walk away, not just from a company, but from his own father's legacy, about what it meant to be denied the number 8. And what it truly meant to watch someone else control everything his father had left behind. And while he poured his heart into these revelations, Teresa remained silent. The longer she withheld her voice, the more powerful Dale Jr.'s story became. That he didn't have to make accusations. Her absence spoke louder than any denial ever could. Fans began to draw their own conclusions. To them, it was no longer just about who was legally right, it was about who had honored Dale Sr.'s legacy with dignity, humility, and love, and who had guarded it like a cold, impenetrable vault. For many, the answer was clear. Dale Jr. had risen from grief, stepped into the spotlight with courage, and carried the weight of that name with grace. Teresa, in contrast, had hidden behind silence and control, managing the Earnhardt brand with the efficiency of a CEO, but without the empathy of a mother or stepmother. Worse still, her silence alienated the very fanbase that had once adored her. In the early 2000s, Teresa had been respected as the woman who stood by Dale Sr.'s side in the winner's circle, but now she was seen as someone who had shut the door on his children, his team, and his son's rightful inheritance. Petitions began circulating online to free the number 8. Merchandise with Dale Jr.'s new branding outsold anything with the DEI logo. NASCAR analysts on TV and radio began to openly question her leadership. In forums and podcasts, fans voiced what Dale Jr. couldn't say publicly, that Teresa had lost the emotional trust of the racing world. The tension between Dale Jr. and Teresa wasn't limited to contracts and legal battles, it seeped into the very fabric of family life and legacy, creating invisible but unyielding walls. Behind the DEI shop, Dale Earnhardt Sr. had owned a large swath of wooded land, a log cabin, and about 100 acres that he had hoped to develop one day. After his death, Dale Jr. dreamed of building his own home there, close to where his father once found peace. In a recent episode of Dale Jr. Download, the former Xfinity Series champion finally opened up about a key moment that deepened the rift with his stepmom. That he shared how he had hoped to buy the large parcel of land, but Teresa refused to sell it to him. Dale Jr. recalled asking, "I wanted to buy the 100 acres by the roadside, would she sell it to me?" Her answer was a definitive no. Respecting her decision, he ended up purchasing property elsewhere in town. The rejection was a quiet blow, one that underscored the growing distance and profound lack of trust. Another deeply personal exclusion came in the form of the Deerhead shop. This was a place filled with Dale Sr.'s most personal belongings, race suits, memorabilia, even Junior and Kelly's old military school uniforms. It was a sacred shrine to family history and cherished memories. However, Dale Jr. hasn't had a glimpse inside for more than 2 decades. Apparently, the day Dad died, they locked the doors and nobody has been in there since. Helpful to add some credibility to that, and I believe that no one has probably set foot in there, and Teresa's made absolutely sure that that's the case. This was more than a denial of access, it was a symbolic shutting out of the past and of the son who carried the Earnhardt name, a legacy that effectively shut him out. Dale Earnhardt Jr. grew up surrounded by roaring engines and flashing cameras, but the silence at home was louder than all of it. His father, a hero to millions, was distant, rarely showing affection or making time for him. The few tender moments, like the time Dale Sr. watched his son win and gave him a look he'd never seen before, were exceptions, not the rule. As Dale Jr. admitted, everything else took a back seat, but the deeper wounds came after his father's death. Teresa Earnhardt stepped in not just as a widow, but as a gatekeeper, meticulously controlling Dale Sr.'s image, his company, and his entire legacy. She shut Dale Jr. out, contracts were withheld, decisions were made behind his back. At the very building bearing his family's name, he was treated like a problem, not a son. Most painfully, Teresa refused to release the number 8 car, Dale Jr.'s symbol of identity. As he left DEI, the message was clear: this was no longer his family's empire, it was hers. In the documentary, Dale Jr. doesn't hold back anymore. He says, "I've been quiet for too long, but now it's time to tell the truth about what really happened, not just on the track, but in my family. His words carry the immense weight of years spent holding back, finally giving voice to the pain and betrayal that profoundly shaped him. That he never wanted a war, only a relationship with his father, a place in the family business, and a connection to the legacy he helped build. Instead, he found walls built from control, silence, and one woman's unyielding grip on his father's memory. Every lap, every win, every sacrifice was a plea for approval he never truly received. When his father died, he hoped the family would unite. Instead, the door slammed shut. Dale Jr. didn't just lose a father, he lost his name, his team, and his place. Now, with nothing left to protect but the truth, he finally speaks up, and it's worse than anyone imagined. If you were Dale Jr., could you have stayed silent for so long? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.